In tears, the billionaire CEO signed the divorce, tore up the pregnancy test and left. 6 years later, hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The fountain pen trembled between his fingers as Ethan Carter stared at the divorce papers spread across the mahogany desk. The afternoon light cut through the blinds, slicing his office into bars of gold and shadow. His throat felt tight, but pride forced his signature to stay steady. Across from him, Claire sat silently, her hands folded in her lap, eyes red from holding back tears. 6 years of marriage reduced to 3 signatures and a hollow silence. When the final paper slid across the desk, she hesitated for only a moment before whispering, "You never even asked why." Ethan clenched his jaw. "Because I already know," he said, though deep down, he knew nothing at all. On the corner of the desk lay a small white envelope, creased, ignored, and almost forgotten. Claire's hand reached for it, but Ethan grabbed it first. "Another secret?" he asked bitterly. She opened her mouth, but no words came. The anger that had fueled his sleepless nights took over. He tore it in half, then again, until the pieces of the pregnancy test fell like confetti of regret across the desk. Claire flinched, but didn't cry. She simply stood, whispered, "Goodbye, Ethan," and walked toward the door. The sound of her heels faded down the marble hallway, and for the first time, the silence in his office felt like punishment. That night, Ethan stood alone in his penthouse, staring at the city that had once been his empire. The skyline glittered with 1,000 lights, but none of them warmed him. He poured himself a drink, though the taste of whiskey burned like guilt. He told himself he was right, that love was weakness, that success demanded sacrifice. But when he closed his eyes, all he could see was the look on her face as he tore that paper apart. Outside, rain began to fall against the glass, blurring the city into streaks of silver. In that moment, Ethan realized the sound of rain felt like someone quietly weeping. He pressed his hand against the window and whispered, "You were right. I never asked why." But she was already gone. Somewhere miles away, Claire sat in a small apartment, one hand resting over her stomach, whispering a promise to the life growing inside her. He would never know. Not yet. And that was how their story ended, or so they both believed. Because sometimes, fate waits patiently for years before it brings the truth back to the surface. The city of Chicago woke under a pale gray dawn, but Ethan Carter had not slept. 6 years had passed since that afternoon when pride won and love was buried beneath it. The name Carter still commanded respect in boardrooms. His company had doubled in value, and his face appeared on magazine covers that called him a visionary. Yet behind every photograph was the same empty look in his eyes, the look of a man who had built a fortress only to realize he was the prisoner inside. He lived alone in a penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. Everything gleamed with precision, from the spotless marble floors to the untouched piano in the corner. He had not played since Claire left. Sometimes he caught himself glancing at the door, half expecting her to walk in like she used to, hair slightly messy from the wind, eyes full of quiet patience. But the apartment stayed silent, echoing with only the hum of the city below. On the morning of the company's 10th anniversary gala, his assistant handed him a glossy invitation list. "We confirmed all partners and new charity sponsors," she said. "There's one addition, Dr. Claire Bennett. She is representing the St. Mary's Children Foundation." The pen slipped from Ethan's fingers before he caught it. For a brief second, the name stole his breath. Bennett, Claire's maiden name. "Include her," he said quickly, masking his reaction. "Send her the VIP pass." His assistant nodded, unaware of the storm that single name had stirred. That night, while the city glittered in celebration, another part of town glowed with the softer light of a small clinic. Claire moved down the hallway carrying a stack of patient files, her white coat slightly wrinkled, her dark hair tied back. 6 years had changed her too. There were faint lines at the corners of her eyes, but her gaze carried calm strength. She was known not for wealth or titles, but for the compassion that filled every room she entered. At the end of the hallway, a boy of about 5 years old waited on a bench, swinging his legs. He looked up as she approached, his hazel eyes bright. "Mom, can we stop by the park after work?" Claire smiled and brushed his hair from his forehead. Only if you promise to finish your homework tonight." "I promise," he said quickly. His grin was identical to another she once knew, and for a moment her heart clenched. She had built a quiet, steady life for herself and her son. She had not spoken Ethan's name in years, not even to little Noah. He only knew his father was far away, and that his mother loved him enough for two people. That was enough, or so she told herself. 2 weeks later, the charity gala filled the Grand Orion Hotel with chandeliers and champagne. Reporters waited by the entrance, flashing cameras as Ethan stepped out of a sleek black car. His expression was unreadable, every inch the powerful CEO, yet his pulse raced with something he could not name. Inside, laughter mixed with the sound of a string quartet. He moved through the crowd until his eyes found her. Claire stood near the silent auction table, wearing a simple navy dress. She looked different, stronger, radiant in a way that time could not dim. For a long moment, Ethan could not move. Memories crashed through him like waves. The sound of her voice, the warmth of her laughter, the way she had once whispered his name. He had convinced himself that success would silence regret, but seeing her now shattered that illusion. She noticed him. Her smile faltered. The air between them thickened, the noise of the ballroom fading into distant hum. "Claire," he said finally, the name tasting both familiar and foreign. "Ethan." Her voice was calm but guarded. "It has been a long time." 6 years, he admitted softly. "You look well." "So do you," she replied, though her eyes said otherwise. There was something unreadable in her expression, something protective, as if she stood between him and a secret. He almost asked, but the words stuck in his throat. Then a small voice called from across the room, "Mom!" A little boy ran toward her, carrying a folded paper airplane. Ethan turned, watching the child with curiosity. The boy's eyes caught the light, the same shade of amber that once stared back at him in the mirror. Claire gently took the boy's hand, her smile trembling just slightly. "Ethan, this is Noah," she said, her tone measured. "My son." For the first time in 6 years, Ethan Carter's world stopped turning. The sound of the orchestra faded. All he could hear was the echo of that long-ago moment, the sound of paper tearing, the life he had thrown away, returning to face him alive, breathing, and looking up with his own eyes. Ethan Carter stood frozen, his gaze locked on the small boy who had just called Claire Mom. The noise of the gala dissolved into a low hum around him, replaced by the sound of his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Noah's small hand clutched Claire's, his other hand still holding the paper airplane. The boy smiled up at him without hesitation, open and innocent. "Hi," Noah said cheerfully. "Are you Mom's friend?" The question hit Ethan like a tremor. His throat tightened before he managed to reply. I suppose I used to be." Claire placed a gentle hand on her son's shoulder. "Noah, this is Mr. Carter. He's someone I used to work with." Her tone was composed, but Ethan heard the distance in it, the careful walls she had built over 6 years of survival. Noah looked between them with bright curiosity. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Carter," he said politely, the way Claire had taught him. Ethan forced a smile. "Nice to meet you too, Noah." The boy's eyes were so familiar, warm amber, flecked with gold near the center, the same color Ethan saw in the mirror every morning. The resemblance was undeniable. Ethan's chest tightened with realization, but he stayed silent. Claire guided Noah toward the dessert table, her hand firm yet gentle. Before following, she turned back briefly. "Enjoy the evening, Ethan," she said softly. He wanted to stop her, to ask 100 questions that now burned inside him, but the sight of the little boy beside her silenced him. Later that night, as guests began to leave, Ethan stood alone near the grand staircase, staring at the empty ballroom. The image of Noah's face replayed endlessly in his mind. He poured a glass of water just to steady his shaking hand. His assistant approached. "Sir, shall I call your car?" Ethan nodded absently, his thoughts elsewhere. The following morning, he sat at his office desk long before sunrise. The city below was still dark, streaked with faint lines of early light. On his desk lay a file with Claire's name information gathered discreetly overnight. It confirmed what his heart already knew. Noah Bennett, born 5 years and 11 months ago. No father listed. Hospital records matched the exact timing after their divorce. Ethan's hand hovered over the page as guilt washed through him like a tide. He had torn that pregnancy test apart without even letting her speak. Now the truth stared him in the face. undeniable and cruel. Hours later, he drove to the St. Mary's Children Foundation under the pretense of discussing a donation. The small clinic stood on a quiet street lined with trees. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and lavender. Through the glass window of an examination room, he saw Claire kneeling beside a young patient, her expression gentle and focused. Noah sat in the corner, drawing with crayons, humming softly to himself. Ethan watched as sunlight fell across them, illuminating the warmth he had once turned away from. When Claire finally noticed him, her expression froze. She handed a chart to a nurse and stepped into the hallway. "You should not be here," she said quietly. "We have nothing to talk about. He is mine, isn't he?" Ethan's voice trembled, the words barely escaping. Claire closed her eyes for a moment. "You made your choice 6 years ago," she said finally. "You tore it up, remember? I thought you were lying," he whispered. "I thought you wanted to trap me. And what did that cost us, Ethan?" Her voice broke slightly, the controlled calm finally cracking. "I raised him alone. Every scraped knee, every fever, every birthday candle. I did that while you built empires." Ethan swallowed hard, unable to meet her eyes. "I cannot undo the past, but I want to know him. Please, Claire, just let me try." She looked at him for a long time, then at the small boy inside the room. "He has your eyes," she said softly, "but he has my heart. Do not take that from him, unless you are sure you will stay." Ethan nodded slowly, his voice steady now. "I will not run again." She studied him for another long second before turning back toward the room. Noah looked up, waving when he saw Ethan through the window. "Mom, that man is here again," he said brightly. Claire took a deep breath. "Yes, sweetheart," she whispered. "He might be someone important to you one day." And as Ethan stood there watching them, he finally understood that redemption would not come from apologies or money. It would come from proving, one small act at a time, that he was worthy of being called father. Ethan Carter left the clinic that day with the weight of 6 years pressing down on his chest. The city outside moved as it always did, people rushing past with purpose, unaware that one man's world had shifted forever. For the first time in his adult life, the billion-dollar CEO felt powerless. He had faced board takeovers, corporate betrayals, and markets collapsing, but nothing compared to the silent judgment in Claire's eyes. That night, sleep would not come. He sat on his balcony overlooking Lake Michigan, the cool wind tugging at his sleeves. The whiskey glass in his hand remained untouched. Inside, the lights from the skyline flickered like distant memories. On his phone, he opened a photo that his assistant had taken from the gala. Claire's smile, Noah's curious gaze. He traced their outlines with his thumb, as if by doing so he could bridge the years between them. The next morning, Ethan showed up again at St. Mary's Children Foundation, this time with no appointment. Claire met him at the entrance, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "You cannot keep showing up like this," she said. "It confuses him." Ethan nodded. "I understand. I just want to help. I want to be part of his life." She sighed, glancing back toward the hallway where Noah's laughter echoed faintly. "He does not even know who you are. How do I explain to a 5-year-old that the father he never met suddenly wants to be here?" Ethan's voice softened. "Tell him the truth, that I made a terrible mistake and that I am trying to make it right." Claire hesitated. The sincerity in his tone unsettled her. She had built so many walls to protect Noah, but she also knew the boy deserved to know his roots. Finally, she said, "One step at a time. If you want to be around, you start small. No promises, no grand gestures. Just be consistent." Ethan agreed instantly. Later that afternoon, he watched from the clinic garden as Claire and Noah worked together, planting small flowers along the fence. Claire laughed when Noah accidentally spilled soil on his shoes. Ethan approached slowly, careful not to intrude. "Do you need an extra hand?" he asked. Noah looked up, his eyes lighting with recognition. "You again? Mum, can he help us?" Claire gave a reluctant nod. "Only if he does not mind getting his hands dirty." Ethan smiled, kneeling beside them. For the next hour, they worked together under the mild spring Sunday. Noah talked non-stop about his favorite superheroes and how he wanted to be an astronaut when he grew up. Ethan listened, every word carving deeper into his heart. Each laugh, each innocent question felt like fragments of a life he had once destroyed and was now being allowed to glimpse again. When they finished, Noah handed him a small watering can. "You did good, Mr. Carter, but you need to water it every day or it will die." Ethan smiled gently. Then I guess I will have to come back tomorrow. The boy nodded approvingly. As Claire packed their things, she watched Ethan from the corner of her eye. There was a gentleness in him she did not remember. Gone was the arrogant man who once equated love with weakness. Now he moved carefully, afraid to break something fragile. When they said goodbye, Ethan walked back to his car. But before driving off, he sat there for a long time, staring at his dirt-stained hands. They were the same hands that once tore up a paper that could have changed everything. Now those hands had planted something small, fragile, and alive. Over the next several weeks, Ethan kept returning, sometimes with new soil, sometimes just to listen to Noah's endless stories about dinosaurs or rockets. Claire remained cautious, always watching, but slowly she began to see the change. He was no longer the man who commanded rooms with his power. He was simply a man trying to earn his son's trust. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan stood by the garden gate, watching Noah chase fireflies. The golden light caught his hair, and for the first time in 6 years, Ethan felt peace flicker inside him. Claire stepped beside him, her voice soft. "He likes having you around." Ethan looked at her, eyes full of quiet gratitude. "Then maybe I am finally doing something right." She gave a small nod. "Maybe. But this time, Ethan, do not disappear." He met her gaze, steady and certain. "I am not going anywhere again." And for the first time since that long-ago day when he signed those papers, Claire believed him. Spring gave way to summer, and with it came quiet moments that stitched the fragments of their lives together. Ethan Carter became a familiar figure at St. Mary's Foundation, no longer the imposing CEO, but simply a man who showed up every afternoon to help water the garden or read stories to the children waiting for their appointments. The nurses began to greet him by name, and Noah greeted him each day with an excited shout that echoed through the courtyard. Claire watched from a distance, her heart caught between gratitude and fear. She had seen promises fade before. She had learned that love could turn to silence without warning. Yet every time she looked at Ethan now, she saw patience, gentleness, and something she had not expected: humility. One warm Saturday, Noah convinced them to go to Lincoln Park Zoo. Claire almost said no, afraid of what it would mean to spend a full day together, but Ethan's quiet smile convinced her otherwise. "It is just a day," he said. "A day for him, not for us." She agreed, though her heart told her it would not be just a day. The morning sunlight danced across the city as they walked through the zoo gates. Noah ran ahead to see the lions, laughing so loudly that even nearby families turned to smile. Ethan followed behind, carrying a backpack filled with snacks and bottled water. Claire noticed how easily he had adapted, how naturally he fell into small acts of care, wiping melted ice cream from Noah's chin, tying his shoelaces, remembering to reapply sunscreen. She had done these things alone for years, and now she found herself wondering how she had managed without help. At one point, Noah tugged Ethan toward the reptile house. "Come on, Dad, Mr. Carter," he blurted, his cheeks flushing. Claire froze. Ethan knelt so he was eye level with the boy. "You can call me whatever makes you comfortable," he said gently. Noah smiled shyly and whispered, "Maybe just Ethan for now." Claire turned away to hide the tears that threatened to spill. Later, they sat by the lake eating sandwiches. The air smelled of water and grass. Noah tossed crumbs to the ducks while Claire and Ethan sat in an uneasy but familiar silence. "He is a good kid," Ethan said softly. "You have done an incredible job." Claire looked at him, her expression a mix of pride and exhaustion. "It was not easy. There were nights when I did not know how to pay the bills or if he would have dinner, but he was always my reason to keep going." Ethan's voice dropped. "I should have been there." She looked at him, her tone calm but firm. "You were not, but you are here now. Do not waste the second chance." He nodded, the gravity of her words sinking deep. As the sun began to set, they walked toward the exit. Noah clung to Ethan's hand, his head drooping with sleep. Claire watched as Ethan lifted him effortlessly, carrying him with care. The sight was almost too much for her heart to bear. At the car, she hesitated. "He has never fallen asleep in anyone's arms but mine," she whispered. Ethan looked down at the sleeping boy and then back at her. "Then I will consider it an honor." His words were simple, but they reached somewhere deep inside her. The drive home was quiet except for the soft rhythm of Noah's breathing. When they reached the apartment, Ethan carefully carried him upstairs and laid him on the small bed, surrounded by books and stuffed animals. For a moment, he just stood there, watching the steady rise and fall of his son's chest. Claire joined him at the doorway. "He looks peaceful," Ethan said. "He is," she replied, "because he feels safe." They both stood there in silence until Claire whispered, "Thank you for today." Ethan turned toward her. "No, Claire, thank you for letting me be here." For the first time in years, there was no anger, no accusation, only quiet understanding. Outside, the city lights shimmered against the night sky, and for a fleeting moment, everything felt whole again. Ethan Carter's life began to change in small, almost invisible ways. His mornings no longer started with conference calls or the metallic taste of stress. Instead, he found himself stopping by a small coffee shop near St. Mary's Foundation, ordering an extra hot chocolate with extra marshmallows, because that was Noah's favorite. He began rearranging his work schedule to spend more time at the clinic, something that astonished his board of directors. "You are turning down meetings with investors?" his assistant asked one morning, bewildered. Ethan simply replied, "Some things are more important than meetings." At first, his colleagues assumed it was a phase, a temporary distraction. But weeks passed, and Ethan stayed the same, calmer, quieter, and strangely happier. Claire noticed the difference too. He showed up when he said he would. Never late, never distracted. He remembered the smallest things: Noah's spelling test, Claire's long shifts at the clinic, even the name of the elderly patient she had been worried about. One afternoon, as the three of them walked home from the park, rain began to fall suddenly. Ethan instinctively pulled off his jacket, holding it over Noah and Claire. They all laughed as they ran down the street, soaked and breathless. At the door of her apartment, Claire handed his jacket back. "You did not have to do that," she said. "I wanted to," he replied. "You have spent years protecting him. Let me do it once in a while." She looked at him, unsure how to respond. Something in his tone was so genuine it disarmed her. Inside, Noah was already changing into dry clothes, humming happily. Claire turned to find Ethan still standing by the door, raindrops sliding down his hair. "You can stay for dinner," she said quietly. It was not an invitation she planned, but the words slipped out naturally. That evening, they sat at the small kitchen table while the smell of homemade pasta filled the air. Noah told them stories from school, how he had drawn a rocket that reached Mars, and how his teacher said he had the biggest imagination in class. Ethan listened as if every word were a treasure. "Maybe one day I will build a real rocket," Noah declared. "Then I will take both of you to space." Claire laughed softly. "That is a big promise." Ethan smiled. "I believe he can do it." After dinner, while Noah brushed his teeth, Ethan helped clear the table. His movements were quiet, deliberate, almost reverent. "I do not know if you realize it," he said, placing the plates in the sink, "but you built something beautiful here, a home, a peace I did not know existed." Claire wiped her hands on a towel and looked at him. "Peace comes from losing everything once. You learn to appreciate small things when big things are gone." He nodded, the weight of her words sinking deep. "I used to think power meant control, but the truth is, control made me lonely." She studied his face for a moment. "And now?" He smiled faintly. "Now I just want to be human again." When Noah ran back into the room in his pajamas, Ethan crouched down and helped him zip the last part. The boy yawned and said, "Good night, Ethan." Without thinking, Ethan whispered, "Good night, son." The word slipped out before he could stop it. Claire froze, her eyes wide, but Noah only smiled sleepily and said, "Good night, Dad," before running to his room. The silence that followed was thick with emotion. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, his voice unsteady. "I did not mean to," Claire interrupted gently. "It is all right. He sees it. Kids always know before adults admit it." She walked him to the door. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, she said, "If you are serious about staying, then stay for him, not for me." Ethan met her gaze. "I am staying for both of you," he said simply. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city lights shimmered on the wet pavement as he walked away, feeling for the first time that the life he had destroyed might still have a chance to be rebuilt, not through grand gestures, but through quiet consistency, one evening at a time. Autumn arrived with its crisp air and golden leaves, bringing quiet changes to the rhythm of their lives. Ethan Carter had kept his promise. He was there every weekend, sometimes early mornings before work, sometimes late evenings after meetings. The routine became natural, almost ordinary. He would pick Noah up from school, help with homework, and stay for dinner if Claire allowed. Neighbors began to recognize him, not as the billionaire CEO whose face appeared in business magazines, but as the man who always carried a small backpack and walked beside a boy with a bright smile. One chilly Saturday morning, Ethan and Noah sat at the kitchen table, building a model rocket together. Glue, tiny screws, and scattered instructions covered every inch of the surface. "We need patience, right?" Noah said seriously, squinting at the instruction sheet. Ethan smiled. "Exactly. The best things take time." Claire watched them from the stove, her heart softening at the sight. She had fought so long to keep her life steady, to protect her son from disappointment, but seeing them together like this made her wonder if maybe, just maybe, redemption was real. After lunch, Claire received a call from the hospital where she volunteered part-time. One of her young patients had taken a bad turn. She hesitated before grabbing her coat. "I need to go for a few hours," she said, her voice calm but rushed. "Will you be okay with him?" Ethan nodded. "Of course. Take your time." When she left, the apartment felt strangely warm and alive. Ethan helped Noah set up the small telescope on the balcony. The sky was pale blue, clouds drifting lazily. "Do you think we can see Mars?" Noah asked. Ethan chuckled. "Maybe not today, but one day soon. I will take you somewhere with a bigger telescope." "Like the Science Museum?" "Bigger," Ethan said, smiling. "Maybe the desert, where the stars look close enough to touch." The boy grinned and leaned against him. "Mom would like that." For a long time, they stood there quietly, the kind of silence that felt comfortable. Ethan realized how much he had missed these simple moments that asked for nothing but presence. Later, when Noah grew tired, Ethan read him a bedtime story about explorers and constellations. The boy's eyes fluttered shut halfway through, and Ethan stayed beside the bed, watching his son sleep. His chest ached with a mix of joy and guilt. 6 years ago, he had walked away from a life he did not understand. Now he was finally seeing what he had lost. When Claire returned that night, exhausted but calm, she found Ethan asleep on the couch, a blanket half fallen to the floor. The quiet glow of the lamp softened his features. She stood there for a long moment, remembering the man he once was, the one who tore papers, who spoke with anger instead of love. But the man before her now looked different, vulnerable, human. She covered him with the blanket and whispered softly, "Maybe you really have changed." The next morning, Ethan woke early to the smell of coffee. Claire was at the counter, her hair loosely tied, her voice gentle as she greeted him. "You stayed the night," she said. "I did not mean to." "It is fine," she replied. "Noah was happy. He said you promised him a trip to see the stars." Ethan smiled sheepishly. "I did. I hope that is all right." "It is," she said, pouring him a cup of coffee. "Just keep your promises this time." He met her gaze and nodded. "I will." Days turned into weeks, and something unspoken began to grow between them again. Trust, fragile but real. One evening, as they watched Noah practice for his school play, Claire leaned closer and said quietly, "You know, he looks up to you." Ethan glanced at his son on stage, pretending to be a brave astronaut. "Then I need to be someone worth looking up to," he replied. Claire smiled faintly. "You are getting there." Outside, the first snow began to fall, covering the city in quiet silver. For Ethan, it felt like a sign the world slowly forgiving him. One flake at a time, winter settled in fully, coating Chicago in white silence. The snow softened the sharp edges of the city, just as time had softened the distance between Ethan and Claire. Weeks had turned into months of quiet rebuilding. The three of them, Ethan, Claire, and little Noah, had formed something that felt fragile but alive. It was not a family in the traditional sense, not yet, but it was a rhythm that felt real. Ethan's world had changed in ways no one at Carter Industries could have predicted. His colleagues noticed how often he left early or turned down corporate galas. When reporters asked about his personal life, he simply smiled and said, "I am learning what matters." One cold Friday evening, the clinic hosted a small fundraiser for the children's wing. Claire was in charge, of course, managing volunteers and donations. Ethan attended quietly, helping set up tables and pouring hot chocolate for guests. Noah sat near the stage with a sketchbook, drawing rockets again. As the night went on, the crowd grew, and laughter filled the hall. For a moment, Everything felt perfect. Then a man approached Claire, a tall, sharply dressed donor from the medical board. He shook her hand, smiling too warmly. "Dr. Bennett, it is always a pleasure. We have missed your lectures at the university." "Thank you, Doctor." "Harris?" she replied politely. Ethan, standing nearby, felt an unexpected sting of jealousy. Harris leaned closer. "Perhaps dinner next week? We could discuss the pediatric program expansion." Before Claire could answer, Noah ran up, tugging her sleeve. "Mom, look! Mr. Carter helped me build this." He held up a small cardboard model rocket. The donor looked at Ethan with polite curiosity. "Ah, the famous Mr. Carter. I have read about you." Ethan extended his hand, his tone steady. "Pleasure to meet you." But the moment left a strange taste in the air. Later, after the event ended and the guests had gone, Ethan stayed behind to help clean up. Claire gathered papers into a box. "He seems interested," Ethan said quietly, meaning Dr. Harris. "He is just a colleague," she replied, but her voice was tight. "Ethan, please do not make this complicated." "I am not trying to," he said. "I just—" He stopped. The truth slipped out before he could stop it. "I do not like the idea of anyone else standing where I used to." The room went still. Claire looked at him, eyes weary but soft. "You gave up that place a long time ago." "I know," he said. "But every day since, I've been trying to earn it back." She sighed. "You cannot undo the past with good intentions." "Then let me prove it through actions," he said. "Not for forgiveness, but for us, for him." She hesitated, searching his face. "You think redemption works like a business deal?" "No," he said softly. "Redemption is love with patience." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she handed him the last box. "Then start with this. Help me carry it to the car." The tension broke into quiet laughter as they stepped outside into the falling snow. The world glowed under the streetlights, their breaths visible in the cold air. Noah ran ahead, kicking snow into the air. "Come on, slowpokes," he shouted. Claire smiled at Ethan. "He is happy." Ethan looked at his son running freely through the snow, his laughter echoing off the buildings. "He is my second chance," Ethan said quietly. "Both of you are." That night, after dropping them off, Ethan returned to his penthouse. For the first time, it no longer felt like home. The walls were silent, the air too clean, too empty. He stood by the window, watching the snow fall, and whispered to the darkness, "If I ever get another chance, I will not waste it." The reflection staring back at him was not the CEO the world knew, but a man finally learning how to be a father, a partner, and maybe one day, a husband again. The following weeks moved like a quiet current beneath winter's surface. Snow melted slowly from the city streets, leaving puddles that reflected a sky ready for spring. For Ethan Carter, every day felt like a test of patience and purpose. He continued to visit the clinic, volunteering at charity events and spending weekends with Claire and Noah. Yet beneath the calm, there lingered an ache, a fear that one mistake could shatter everything he had rebuilt. One Monday afternoon, while Ethan was reviewing project plans in his office, his phone buzzed with a call from Claire. Her voice was unsteady. "Ethan, it is Noah. He collapsed at school. They are taking him to St. Mary's Hospital." The world around him blurred. He was out of his office before anyone could stop him, his mind repeating only one thought: not him, not again. When he arrived at the hospital, Claire was already there, pale and shaking. Doctors moved quickly through the hallway. "He fainted during recess," Claire explained, her voice cracking. "They think it is severe dehydration, but they are running more tests." Ethan took her hand without hesitation. For the first time since their divorce, she did not pull away. Hours passed in anxious silence until finally the doctor approached. "He is stable now. We want to keep him overnight for observation." Relief flooded them both, but the fear still clung to the air. When they entered Noah's room, the boy lay on the bed, hooked to monitors but smiling weakly. "Hey, buddy," Ethan whispered, sitting beside him. "You scared us." Noah blinked sleepily. "I am okay, Dad." The word hit Ethan's heart like lightning. He looked at Claire, who only nodded faintly, tears filling her eyes. "You just rest," Ethan said softly, brushing Noah's hair back. "We are right here." That night, while Noah slept, Claire and Ethan sat in the dim hospital room. Machines hummed softly, and the moonlight filtered through the blinds. "I have never been so afraid," Claire admitted, her voice trembling. Every time he so much as coughs, I panic. I cannot lose him. Ethan looked at her, his expression full of pain. You will not. I will do whatever it takes to keep him safe. You are not alone in this anymore. She studied his face in the quiet glow of the room, realizing that he meant it. For years, she had carried every burden herself. Now, for the first time, she felt someone truly sharing it. I used to resent you, she whispered. But right now, I am just grateful you are here. Ethan nodded slowly. Maybe that is all redemption is showing up when it matters. The next morning, Noah's condition improved. He sat up in bed, eating his breakfast while Claire helped him with his juice. When Ethan walked in carrying a small stuffed bear from the gift shop, Noah's face lit up. You brought me a bear. He is your bodyguard now, Ethan said with a grin. He even has a name tag, Captain Brave. Noah laughed, hugging it tightly. Claire smiled, shaking her head. You always know how to make him smile. He deserves to smile, Ethan replied quietly. Later that day, as they left the hospital together, Claire turned to him. You were good with him. With me. Thank you. You do not have to thank me, he said. He is my son. I should have been doing this all along. She hesitated, then said softly, You are doing it now. That is what matters. The wind carried her words like a small mercy. Ethan looked at her, eyes filled with quiet determination. I made him a promise, Claire, and I intend to keep it for both of you. As they walked toward the car, Noah held both their hands, one on each side. To anyone watching, they looked like a family. And though the road ahead was uncertain, for the first time in years, none of them were walking alone. Spring arrived early that year, bringing sunlight that spilled across the streets and into the corners of their quiet lives. Noah had fully recovered, his laughter returning like a melody that filled every room. Ethan Carter spent more and more time with him and Claire, until their days began to flow together like pages of a story slowly being rewritten. What had started as cautious coexistence had grown into something that felt steady and real. Yet beneath the surface, Ethan still carried a shadow, the unspoken guilt of the man he had been, and the fear that his past could return to take it all away. One afternoon, Claire invited him to Noah's school for the annual family open house. Ethan arrived early, wearing a simple jacket instead of his usual suit, trying not to stand out. When he entered the classroom, he froze. Dozens of drawings decorated the walls, bright with color and imagination. In the center was Noah's work, a family portrait drawn in crayon, a tall man, a woman with long hair, and a small boy standing between them, all holding hands under a bright Sunday. At the bottom, the words read, My family, Mom, Dad, and me. Ethan stood staring until Claire came up beside him. He made that last week, she said softly. I did not have the heart to tell him not to. Ethan's voice was low. Please do not. It is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. She looked at him, seeing something unguarded in his expression. You have changed, she said quietly. Completely. He met her eyes. No, I am finally becoming the man I should have been. The open house continued with music, laughter, and shy children reciting poems for their parents. When it was Noah's turn, he walked to the small stage, clutching a piece of paper. This is a story about a promise, he began, reading carefully. It is about a man who was lost but found his way home again, and he did it because someone believed he could. His eyes searched the crowd until they found Ethan's. My story is about my dad. Claire's breath caught, and Ethan had to look away for a moment to keep his composure. When the applause came, it was thunderous, though all he could hear was the sound of his heart. Later, outside, as families walked to their cars, Noah ran ahead to play with his friends. Claire and Ethan lingered near the school gate. He believes in you, she said softly. So do I. But Ethan, this is not about grand gestures anymore. It is about showing up every single day. Ethan nodded. I will. I promise. For a moment, the silence between them felt like forgiveness. Then Claire looked down, a hint of sadness crossing her face. The truth is, I do not know what this means for us. You are still part of a world I do not belong to, a world that once broke me. He shook his head. Then I will leave that world behind. Nothing I built there matters if it costs me this. You cannot just walk away from who you are, she said gently, but you can choose what kind of man you will be. The next morning, Ethan proved she was right. At Carter Industries, the boardroom was in chaos. Investors were furious that he had missed another meeting. When they demanded answers, He simply said, "Family first." They looked at him as though he had spoken another language. He smiled, signing over part of his controlling shares to charity initiatives. "If I have to choose between legacy and love," he said, "then I choose love." That evening, he went to Claire's apartment. She was reading with Noah when he knocked softly. "I quit my position," he said simply. "I will still work, but on my own terms. I want to live a life that matters to him, to you, not to shareholders." Claire looked stunned. "Ethan, that is everything you worked for." "No," he said. "You and he are everything I was working toward. I just did not know it until now." Noah looked up from his book. "Does that mean you can come to my baseball game this weekend?" Ethan laughed softly. "Yes, buddy. I would not miss it for the world." As the evening light faded through the window, the three of them sat together, not as broken pieces trying to fit again, but as something new, something whole. The weeks that followed felt different, lighter somehow, as though the weight of years had finally begun to lift. Ethan Carter no longer spent his mornings in glass towers overlooking the city, but in a small, rented office downtown, where he was starting a non-profit to fund medical programs for underprivileged children. The irony was not lost on him. Once, his name had been synonymous with profit and power, but now it was tied to something that gave instead of taking. Claire watched quietly from the edges of his transformation, hesitant yet proud. Their conversations were easier, no longer sharp or defensive, but filled with quiet understanding. She saw how Noah thrived under Ethan's steady presence, his grades improving, his laughter brighter. It was as if the missing pieces of their lives had started falling into place. Still, there were shadows. One late evening, after Noah had gone to bed, Ethan sat across from Claire at her kitchen table. The glow from the small lamp painted soft light across her face. "I want to tell him the truth," he said carefully. "He deserves to know I am his father." Claire's fingers tightened around her mug. "He already knows, Ethan. Maybe not with words, but he knows in his heart. The question is, are you ready to hear him call you that every day?" Ethan met her eyes, his expression steady but full of emotion. "I want nothing more." She nodded slowly. "Then be prepared to carry it, because once you have his trust, there is no halfway." A silence settled between them, comfortable but heavy with the truth they both understood. The next weekend, they attended Noah's first baseball game together. The field was full of families, the smell of popcorn and freshly cut grass filling the air. Noah wore his oversized cap and held his bat with fierce concentration. Ethan stood at the fence, cheering louder than anyone else when the boy hit his first run. Claire looked at him and smiled, seeing the man she once fell in love with, but different, now mature, patient, grounded. When the game ended, Noah ran to them, eyes shining. "Did you see that, Dad? I did it." The word came out naturally, without hesitation. Ethan's throat tightened, but he smiled through it. "I saw, buddy. You were amazing." Claire's hand brushed against his arm lightly, a quiet acknowledgement of how far they had come. That night, Ethan tucked Noah into bed while Claire watched from the doorway. "Dad?" Noah asked sleepily. "Do you promise you will always be here?" Ethan's voice trembled, but his answer was firm. "Always. Even when you do not see me, I will be right here." He pointed gently to Noah's chest. "In here." The boy smiled and drifted to sleep, clutching the small stuffed bear Ethan had given him months ago. Later, as Claire walked Ethan to the door, she said softly, "He believes you now." "Then I cannot fail him again," Ethan replied. She hesitated, then whispered, "Or me." He looked at her, the faintest smile touching his lips. "I will not fail either of you." The next day, Ethan received a call from an old business associate, offering him a chance to return to Carter Industries as chairman. "The company needs stability," the man said. "We need you." Ethan looked out his window at the children playing in the park below and said calmly, "I already found stability. It is just not made of glass and steel." When he hung up, he felt lighter than he had in years. That evening, he joined Claire and Noah for dinner again, and as they laughed over burnt pancakes and stories from Noah's day, Ethan realized something simple but profound. Redemption was not a single act. It was 1,000 small choices, made every day, to love better, to show up, and to stay. The following months brought new beginnings that felt fragile but full of hope. Ethan Carter's non-profit began gaining attention for its outreach work, helping families who could not afford medical care for their children. Reporters wrote stories about the former billionaire who had traded his empire for empathy. He rarely gave interviews, but when he did, his answers were simple. "I lost everything once," he told one journalist, "and that is how I learned what really matters." Claire watched from a distance, proud yet cautious. She had seen how easily the world could lift a man up, only to tear him down. Still, this version of Ethan seemed unshakable, not because of wealth or status, but because he finally understood what it meant to stay grounded. Their days fell into an easy rhythm: morning coffee shared before work, evenings spent helping Noah with homework, weekends at the park. Life was not perfect, but it was peaceful. One evening, as the three of them sat on the living room floor building another model rocket, Noah asked innocently, "Do you think we can all live together one day like a real family?" The question froze the room for a heartbeat. Claire exchanged a glance with Ethan, her expression unreadable. "Maybe someday," she said softly. "When the time is right." Noah smiled and went back to his glue and paper, satisfied with that answer. Later, after he fell asleep, Ethan turned to her. "He deserves that. So do you." "Ethan," she said quietly, "you do not have to prove anything anymore. You already came back." "It is not about proving," he replied. "It is about protecting what I almost destroyed." His tone was steady, filled with conviction. But the next morning, that promise would be tested. When Ethan arrived at the non-profit's office, the lobby was crowded with reporters. His assistant hurried toward him, panic in her eyes. "A story broke this morning," she said. "Someone leaked confidential financial files from your old company. They are claiming you mishandled funds years ago." Ethan froze. "That is not true." "I know," she said, "but the headlines are everywhere." Within hours, the news spread online photos, old documents, speculations. His phone buzzed non-stop. Some investors from his former life accused him of deflection, others of hypocrisy. By afternoon, cameras waited outside his building. Claire found out when a colleague showed her a news alert at the clinic. Her chest tightened, not because she doubted him, but because she knew how the world loved to destroy what it could not understand. When she reached Ethan's office that evening, she found him sitting at his desk, staring at the screen. "I did nothing wrong," he said, his voice low but steady. "They are twisting old data, but I cannot stop the noise." Claire stepped closer. "You cannot control what people believe. You can only control what you do next." "And what if this ruins everything?" he asked. "What if I lose the foundation, the donors, everything I built to make it right?" "Then you rebuild again," she said firmly, "because that is what you do now. You do not run." He looked up at her, eyes full of quiet gratitude. "I used to think strength meant never falling," he said. "Now I know it means standing back up, even when the world is watching." Claire smiled faintly. "Good. Then let them watch." That night, he held a press conference in the small community hall instead of a corporate stage. No lights, no spectacle, just Ethan speaking from the heart. "Years ago, I made mistakes," he admitted. "Not the ones in those headlines, but the kind that hurt the people I loved. I cannot erase my past, but I can spend the rest of my life making sure it means something. I am not the man I was, and I will not let anyone else write my story again." The next morning, the backlash began to fade, replaced by unexpected support. Parents from the foundation wrote messages online. "He helped my daughter walk again. He paid for our son's treatment when no one else would." The truth drowned out the noise. Claire read every word with tears in her eyes. For the first time, Ethan had faced a storm without running and won. The scandal that once threatened to destroy everything faded as quickly as it had come, replaced by something Ethan Carter had not expected: respect. People began to see him not as a fallen tycoon or a headline, but as a man who had learned to stand in truth. Months passed, and life settled again into a rhythm that felt both ordinary and extraordinary. The non-profit thrived, expanding to new cities. Children who once had no chance at care now had futures filled with hope. Ethan still worked long hours, but now his evenings always ended the same way, with dinner at Claire's apartment, stories from Noah, and laughter that filled the small rooms like light. One evening in early summer, Claire stood by the window, watching the sunset spill gold across the city. Ethan walked up beside her, holding 2 cups of tea. "Do you ever think about how far we have come?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Sometimes I think about how close we came to losing everything instead." "But we did not," he said quietly, "because you never stopped believing there was something left to save." Claire turned to him, her expression soft. I stopped believing for a long time, Ethan. You are the one who reminded me how to start again. He took her hand carefully, as though afraid it might vanish if he held it too tightly. Then let me keep reminding you, he whispered. Down the hall, Noah called out, "Come on, you two. You are missing the best part." They joined him on the balcony, where he had set up a small telescope aimed at the rising moon. "Look, Dad," he said proudly. "I found the crater we read about." Ethan bent down to look, smiling as he adjusted the focus. "You did, buddy. That is incredible." Claire watched them, her heart swelling with quiet peace. She remembered the man who once tore up a life he did not understand, the man who walked away from love because he thought power could fill the emptiness inside him. That man no longer existed. What stood beside her now was someone reborn through humility, shaped by loss and softened by love. Later that night, after Noah had gone to sleep, Ethan and Claire sat outside again, the night air warm around them. "I have been thinking," he began slowly, "about us, about what comes next." She tilted her head, curious. "What do you mean?" "I have spent years trying to rebuild what I destroyed," he said. "But maybe it is time to stop rebuilding the past and start building the future." He reached into his pocket and took out a small ring, a simple band, nothing like the diamond he had once given her years ago. This time, no promises of perfection, just one truth. "I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you and Noah never doubt how loved you are." Claire's eyes filled with tears. "Ethan," he shook his head gently, "no pressure. You do not have to answer now. I just needed you to know." She took the ring, holding it between her fingers, the metal warm from his touch. "You already gave us what we needed," she said softly. "Peace, stability, and a man who learned how to love." He smiled, his chest tightening with emotion. "Then maybe that is enough." Weeks later, they stood together on a small hill outside the city, where Ethan's foundation had helped build a new children's hospital. A plaque near the entrance read, "Dedicated to those who remind us that second chances create miracles." As children ran through the courtyard, laughing, Ethan wrapped his arm around Claire's shoulders while Noah chased bubbles nearby. The sky above them was endless, painted in soft hues of pink and gold. For a long time, none of them spoke. They did not need to. The silence itself was a prayer, a quiet thank you to the life they had almost lost, but found again. Ethan looked at Claire and whispered, "I once tore apart a life I did not deserve, but somehow life gave me another chance to learn what love really means." She smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. "And you did, Ethan. You truly did." The camera of time seemed to pull back then, leaving them as three figures framed by light: the man who had fallen, the woman who forgave, and the child who made them whole again. This emotional tale follows a powerful CEO who loses everything only to rediscover love, redemption, and the meaning of family. It is one of those rare millionaire stories that blend heartbreak, humility, and hope into a journey of transformation. When a man who once believed money could fix everything faces the truth of his mistakes, he learns that compassion is worth more than fortune. Through tearful goodbyes, quiet forgiveness, and second chances, this story captures the heart of all great millionaire stories where wealth cannot buy the simple gift of being loved. From broken promises to healing moments, it reminds us that real strength lies in kindness, not control, and that even the richest hearts must learn to give. Perfect for fans of emotional dramas, redemption arcs, and cinematic storytelling, this piece stands among the most inspiring millionaire stories ever told. By the end, it leaves a lasting message that sometimes losing the world is how we finally find ourselves.